Brutus wasn't the kind of dog you overlooked. Towering and broad-chested, with coarse black and tan fur and eyes like steel marbles, he radiated an energy that made even the most experienced shelter volunteers hesitate. He had arrived 2 weeks ago, picked up by animal control near a gas station off Route 6. No collar, no microchip, just a heavy chain hanging from his neck and a scar near his left ear that looked too clean to be accidental. The first day at Edgewood Animal Shelter was a disaster. When they tried to get him from the intake crate into a kennel, Brutus had snarled and lunged at the leash, mouth frothing, snapping inches from a handler's arm. 2 staffers backed off immediately. "That's not just fear," one of them muttered. "That's aggression." And once a dog was labeled aggressive, the clock started ticking. Edgewood wasn't a bad shelter. The staff cared. But with overcrowding and limited funding, any dog that posed a potential danger was moved to the Red Wing, a quieter row of kennels where difficult cases waited, sometimes for adoption, often for something else. From the moment he was placed in Kennel 47, Brutus didn't bark. He watched. When people passed, he didn't wag his tail or push his nose toward the bars like the others. He stood at attention, silent, muscles tight. If anyone got too close, especially men, he'd flash his teeth and growl, deep and guttural. No one knew his story, but his body told one of alertness, tension, and warning. Miranda took notice. She was a 26-year-old vet tech assistant who had started volunteering at the shelter during college and never left. She had a soft spot for the hard cases, the dogs others avoided. And there was something about Brutus that haunted her. It wasn't just his size or his cold, unreadable stare. It was the way he reacted to certain things. A uniform, a loud bang, even the rattle of a metal food bowl. He didn't cower. He braced. Most dogs flinch. Brutus readied himself like he expected orders. "He doesn't bite the bowl," she told her colleague one evening. "He nudges it into the corner and waits until no one's looking to eat, like he thinks he's not allowed to." But her observations didn't count for much on paper. What did count were the 3 failed behavioral evaluations, each ending with snarls and barely avoided bites. By the second week, the shelter's lead behaviorist filed the form that no one wanted to see: unfit for adoption. Schedule for humane euthanasia. Miranda stared at the document in the break room, her stomach twisting. "This isn't right," she whispered. "We're missing something." But policy was policy. Dangerous dogs couldn't take up space when dozens more were flooding in every day. That night, long after closing, she sat outside Brutus's kennel. No clipboard, no leash, just her and a battered paperback novel. She read aloud, soft, rhythmic, soothing. Brutus didn't approach. He stood in the shadows at the back of the kennel, ears tilted forward, eyes fixed on her. He didn't growl. He didn't move, but he listened. And that was enough for Miranda to try one last thing. She snapped a photo, Brutus, partly in shadow, face sharp with intelligence, and posted it on an obscure rescue forum online. Her caption was brief, but heartfelt. "This dog is marked aggressive, but I swear he's trained. He doesn't react like a stray. He reacts like a soldier. If anyone knows anything about working dogs, please, we only have 3 days left." She hit post and stared at the screen, hoping for a miracle. Somewhere out there, she believed, was someone who could see what she saw. Brutus wasn't dangerous. He was misunderstood, and he was waiting for something or someone to give him a command. The shelter air felt heavier after the red tag went up on Brutus's kennel. Miranda couldn't stop glancing at it whenever she passed by. Euthanasia scheduled. 3 days. It wasn't bold or dramatic, just a simple printout laminated in plastic. But for the dogs who wore that sign, it might as well have been a countdown to extinction. To most, Brutus was already gone. The front desk stopped mentioning him to walk-in adopters. The trainers didn't bother trying again. Even the volunteers, many of whom were animal lovers to the core, avoided his kennel. His silence made people uneasy. His stare made them nervous. One volunteer confessed she had nightmares after working in his wing. But Miranda refused to give up. Every morning before opening hours, she brought a folding chair and sat across from his kennel door. Not close enough to provoke him, but close enough that he saw her. She read books, scrolled her phone, sometimes just sat there sipping coffee. She didn't try to coax him, didn't baby talk him like most people did with dogs. She just existed in his world, quietly. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Brutus changed. He stopped baring his teeth when she walked up. His ears stayed perked instead of flattened back. One morning, she caught him lying down when she arrived, not sleeping. Brutus never slept when people were near, but resting, watching. Still, it wasn't enough. The shelter was overcrowded. 2 litters of puppies had come in over the weekend, and 3 adult dogs were already being crated due to lack of kennel space. The director, a kind but pragmatic woman named Linda, pulled Miranda aside during lunch. "Sweetheart, I know you care," she said gently, "but we don't have room for a 90-pound liability." Miranda clenched her jaw. "He's not a liability. He's something else. I can feel it." Linda shook her head. "Feelings don't outweigh a bite risk and 3 failed evaluations. If he hurts someone, it's on us." Miranda wanted to scream. She didn't. Instead, she nodded and returned to her desk. That night, she couldn't sleep. At 2:17 a.m., she opened her laptop and stared at Brutus's intake photo. It wasn't a good picture. His head was lowered, ears stiff, tail tucked. But his eyes caught her. They didn't look wild. They looked alert, trained, waiting. She started writing, fingers flying over the keyboard. Urgent, German Shepherd mix. Labeled aggressive, but he reacts to structure. Commands. Doesn't eat until told. Doesn't bark. Doesn't flinch. He braces, like he's waiting for orders. 3 days left. Please, if you know working dogs, if you've trained military or police canines, look at him. Something's not right. He's not just a stray. She uploaded the picture and posted the message to an online forum she used to volunteer with in college. A small but active community of retired handlers, trainers, and military dog advocates. Then she sat back, staring at the glowing screen in the dark. 2 hours passed. No response. She left the page open and fell asleep at her desk. By the time she arrived at the shelter the next morning, Brutus's tag had been updated. Euthanasia scheduled. 48 hours. She stood outside his kennel longer than usual. Brutus stood, too, calm, still, attentive. His head tilted slightly at her presence, just for a moment. And then, somewhere across the state, a retired handler named Jack Connolly was reading her post. He leaned forward in his chair, studying the dog in the photo. "That stance," he whispered. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. "I want to meet him," he typed. "Tomorrow. Before it's too late." Jack Connolly had never expected to feel that kind of pull again. He had left the Army 4 years ago, trading battlefields and bunkers for a quiet house on a quiet street, just outside a quiet town. The silence used to feel foreign, almost hostile. Now, it was the only place he could think. Most days were filled with routine, walking the perimeter of his property, tending his late wife's vegetable garden, volunteering at a local shelter where the dogs barked. Yes, but nothing like the dogs he'd known. But that photo, that dog, had disrupted everything. It wasn't just the breed. Jack had worked with plenty of German Shepherds during his time with the K9 unit. It was the posture, tense but controlled. The look in the dog's eyes, focused, not feral. Waiting, not wild. He read the post again. He doesn't bark. Doesn't eat in front of people. He braces like he's waiting for orders. It was too specific, too familiar. Jack closed his laptop, stood, and grabbed his keys. Edgewood Animal Shelter was 110 miles away, but Jack didn't hesitate. He hadn't driven that far in months. His knees ached, his back protested, and the old pickup groaned with age. But by noon the next day, he was pulling into the lot behind the shelter. The building was modest. Rows of kennels, a prefab office, a small shaded play yard. But the tension in the air was unmistakable. A young woman with a ponytail and tired eyes met him outside. "You're Jack." "Miranda." She nodded quickly, like she didn't want to waste time. "Thank you for coming. They're still calling him Brutus, but I think he had another name. I think he knows something." Jack followed her through the kennels. Dozens of dogs barked and jumped at the chain-link fences as they passed, claws scraping metal and tongues lolling out. But one kennel was quiet. Brutus was still. He stood in the far corner, ears forward, eyes locked on Jack, like he recognized something, or was trying to. Jack didn't say a word at first. He stood, shoulders squared, just outside the kennel. The dog didn't growl. He didn't lunge. He just watched. Then Jack took a slow step forward, lowered himself to one knee, and said it. "Platts." Brutus dropped to the floor instantly. No hesitation, no confusion. The kennel staff froze. Miranda's hand flew to her mouth. Jack's breath caught in his throat. "Bleed," he added softly. Brutus stayed frozen, his body still and compliant, head between his paws. Jack stood up, never breaking eye contact. "I've seen that response 100 times," he said quietly. "This dog isn't just trained, he's professionally trained. Military or police, and judging by how quick he drops on command, it was drilled into him." The shelter supervisor approached from behind, skeptical. "You're telling me that thing is a service dog?" Jack glanced at her, then back to Brutus. "I'm telling you this dog knows what Platts means. That's not something you pick up on the streets. That's K9 protocol. German commands. Someone taught him to obey in combat conditions." Miranda stepped forward. "So he's not aggressive?" Jack shook his head. "No, he's not aggressive. He's lost." For the first time, Brutus, still lying flat on the kennel floor, let out a low, soft sound. It wasn't a growl. It was a whine. Something inside him had stirred. And Jack knew, in that moment, the countdown on Brutus's life had just paused. The room was quiet, eerily so for a shelter. Even the nearby dogs had gone still, their barking replaced by a strange, watchful silence. Brutus remained in position, head low, eyes forward. The red tag still hung on his kennel door, but something intangible had shifted in the air. Jack remained crouched, his tone calm but firm. "Let's try something else." He rose to his feet and issued another command. "Stay." Brutus stood, smooth, fluid, not hesitant, trained. Then, "Fuss." Brutus walked to the edge of the kennel, heel tight to the bars, positioning himself beside Jack's stance even with the gate between them. Tail low, body calm. Miranda gasped. "Did you see that?" she whispered. He obeyed. "That's perfect form." Jack nodded without breaking eye contact with the dog. Someone spent hundreds of hours on this dog. He's not just trained. He's disciplined. This is a working K9, or was. The shelter supervisor, watching from a distance, slowly approached. "Are you sure this isn't just a fluke?" Jack turned toward her. "You don't get obedience like this by accident. These are advanced German commands, used by law enforcement, military, or specialized trainers. No street dog picks that up on his own." He was responding like he was still on duty, like he's waiting for his handler. Miranda looked back at Brutus, her voice thick. "But if that's true, what happened to him?" Jack didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly approached the kennel gate, pausing every few steps to watch Brutus's response. The dog remained still, eyes flicking up every so often to meet his. No hackles raised, no teeth, just readiness. Jack reached the latch and spoke with a tone that was more than command. It was trust. "Os." Brutus took a single step back, giving Jack room. With a soft click, the gate opened. And nothing happened. No lunge, No bark. Brutus simply sat, waiting. Jack stepped inside, careful but confident, and gestured to his side. Here, the dog moved in, gently, and sat at attention beside him. It was the kind of moment shelter workers almost never saw. Miranda exhaled shakily, pressing her hand to her chest. We were about to kill a soldier. Jack nodded grimly. And not just any soldier. One that's grieving. He crouched again, finally reaching out to brush the dog's shoulder. Brutus stiffened for a moment, then leaned into the touch. Jack turned to the staff. You need to scan him again. Deeper. Some of these dogs are chipped with specialized codes. Military-level encryption. They won't ping with regular equipment. The supervisor hesitated. We scanned him twice. Nothing came up. Scan him again, Jack insisted. Use the backup scanner, the one with deeper frequency range. She relented, radioing for one of the techs. 10 minutes later, the tech returned with the secondary scanner. Jack stayed beside Brutus, hand resting on his flank while the scanner moved slowly along his spine. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, beep. Everyone froze. The screen displayed a series of numbers. No name, no contact, just a code string beginning with K91172A. Jack squinted. That's a military working dog ID. Army issue, judging by the format. Miranda's eyes widened. You were right. Jack stood slowly. This dog didn't run away. He was lost in the system. He glanced down at Brutus, who now stood quietly at his side. There was no tension, no confusion, just clarity. He had found someone who spoke his language. And for the first time in weeks, Brutus wagged his tail. 2 hours after the scanner beeped, the shelter office was buzzing with activity like it hadn't in weeks. Linda, the shelter director, was on the phone with someone from a government agency. Department of Defense, maybe. Jack had made the call himself, calmly explaining what they had found. The coded microchip. The training. The obedience to military K9 commands. The unmistakable behavior of a dog who had been deployed, then forgotten. Miranda paced near the doorway, chewing the skin around her thumbnail. Brutus. No. K91172A. Lay at Jack's feet like a statue, still and patient. He hadn't moved from Jack's side since the kennel door opened. No aggression, no pacing. He'd simply locked into that old rhythm, the one he had once known well. Wait for command. Obey. They said they'll search the handler database, Jack said finally, hanging up. He was registered to a military base in Nevada, part of a K9 explosives unit. Likely served overseas. Miranda's brow furrowed. Then how did he end up abandoned in a gas station 3 states away? Jack sighed. That's the part no one wants to talk about. There was a heaviness in his voice, one Miranda hadn't heard before. Sometimes, Jack continued, when a handler is injured or killed, the dog is reassigned or retired. But if the paperwork gets lost, or if the dog ends up with someone unqualified, they slip through the cracks. Miranda's stomach turned. So someone lost track of him, or gave him away, or dumped him. These dogs bond hard with their handlers. If that connection's broken the wrong way, Jack looked down at the dog. They shut down, and sometimes they lash out. Not out of rage, but confusion. Panic. Miranda knelt, her voice soft. You weren't angry, were you, boy? You were scared. You were mourning. Brutus nudged her hand gently, the motion barely there. His body remained relaxed, but his eyes met hers with a strange kind of softness, like he understood. Jack spoke again. They're going to pull his file. Might take a day or two. They need to confirm whether he's still active, retired, or declared surplus. That last word stung. Surplus. Like gear. Like cargo. Not a partner. Miranda shook her head. He deserves better than this. He saved lives. Who knows what he's been through? Jack looked at her. He deserves closure. We all do. For the rest of the day, Jack stayed by Brutus's side. The shelter moved him out of the Red Wing and into a quieter room in the back, one usually reserved for recovering animals. Miranda brought in a thick dog bed, some treats, even a chew toy. Brutus sniffed it politely but didn't play. His eyes remained alert, scanning each doorway, each shadow, still waiting for something only he could name. That evening, Miranda checked the shelter's inbox and froze. There was an email marked Kuominafidenitu. Hadil. Ehain and Deli. He met she. She opened it with trembling fingers. The handler's name was listed: Staff Sergeant Mason Cole, a former Army explosives tech. Status: deceased, Kaya, Afghanistan. Next to his name, one line raid. Assigned K9 partner. Ajax. Service ID K91172A. Miranda whispered the name aloud. Ajax. Jack looked up sharply. That's his name. She nodded slowly. It was Ajax. Jack turned to the dog. Ajax, he said firmly. The dog looked up. This time, he moved. Slowly, he stood, walked to Jack, and rested his head against the man's chest. For the first time, he let out a sound that wasn't a growl or a whine. It was a deep, low sigh, like something inside him had finally let go. His name had been spoken. And after all this time, Ajax was no longer lost. The shelter felt different after that night. It wasn't just the red tag coming down from Ajax's kennel door. It wasn't just the emails and phone calls flooding in after Miranda cautiously shared the dog's story with a small network of veterans organizations. It was the dog himself. He had changed. Ajax. The name fit him like a long-lost uniform. The moment Jack spoke it, the haunted stillness in Ajax's eyes cracked, as if the sound had reached a memory buried beneath fear, grief, and confusion. By morning, the transformation was visible. He greeted Jack at the door with a slow wag of the tail. He took food gently from Miranda's hand. When the maintenance man dropped a wrench behind him, and it clattered to the floor, Ajax flinched, but didn't bolt. Instead, he looked at Jack for direction. Good boy, Jack said softly, still sharp. The word was spreading now. The Department of Defense had confirmed the match. K91172A was indeed Ajax, formerly stationed at FOB Martingale in Afghanistan, where he served 2 tours alongside Staff Sergeant Mason Cole. The records showed that Mason had been killed in an IED blast during a mission Ajax had helped secure. The dog had been evacuated, injured, disoriented, and reassigned to a handler stateside. But something went wrong. That part of the story was missing. A gap in paperwork, a silent administrative failure. He fell through the cracks, Miranda said quietly, scanning the files. Like a ghost, no one noticed. But someone had. Jack. He and Ajax began working together daily. Jack would arrive each morning with training treats, a worn leather leash, and a quiet kind of presence that Ajax responded to instinctively. They worked through old commands. Sits. Plats. Such. Every cue Ajax followed was another piece of his identity returning. One afternoon, Jack led him to the shelter's small, gated play yard. Time to see if you still remember the fun stuff, he said with a half-smile. He tossed a ball. No command. No pressure. Ajax didn't chase it. But after a few moments of hesitation, he trotted out, picked it up, and brought it back. Not playfully, not wildly, but with calm, practiced purpose, like it was part of a job. He's still working, Miranda observed from the gate. Jack nodded. That's who he is. He was never meant to be someone's pet. He was a partner, a soldier. That night, Jack sat outside Ajax's kennel, the two of them resting side by side under the low hum of shelter lights. Miranda brought out a tray with coffee for Jack and a fresh blanket for Ajax. She watched them quietly. 2 veterans from different worlds, bound by something unspoken. You're not just helping him, she said softly. He's helping you too. Jack gave a quiet nod. I didn't know I needed this. Not until I saw him. There was silence for a while. Miranda hesitated, then asked, So, what now? He's not adoptable in the traditional sense. Jack didn't answer immediately. Finally, he looked down at Ajax, who had rested his head across Jack's boot, eyes half closed. I think he's already made his choice. The next morning, Jack signed the papers. Not as an adopter. As a handler. A veteran reclaiming a warrior the world had nearly forgotten. And just like that, Ajax's story began to rewrite itself, not as the tale of an aggressive stray, but as a hero reunited with purpose, with language, with loyalty. And for the first time in a long time, Ajax belonged. 2 weeks after leaving the shelter, Ajax walked at Jack's side like he'd always belonged there. The small town of Eldridge welcomed them with quiet curiosity. Neighbors nodded as Jack passed on his morning walks, and a few kids even pointed from across the street when they saw Ajax, his sleek coat shining in the sunlight, his posture proud. He still moved like a soldier, precise, alert, but there was less stiffness now. More ease. Jack had cleared a space in his house for him. The old guest room became Ajax's corner, with a bed made from a folded army blanket and a toy box filled with training gear and chew ropes. At night, Ajax sometimes whined softly in his sleep, paws twitching like he was running through memories. Jack would sit nearby, speaking low, familiar words until the dog settled again. He knew those dreams. He'd had them too. Every morning, they trained. At first, it was just the basics: obedience drills, scent trails in the yard, control exercises with distractions. But slowly, Jack began to test Ajax's limits, reawakening the skills dulled by months of confusion. And Ajax responded with quiet intensity. His body remembered. His heart was catching up. By the 3rd week, Jack brought Ajax to the local VA center. The front desk nurse eyed the German shepherd with mild suspicion. He's safe around people. Jack nodded. He's a veteran, like me. The counselor, a tall, soft-spoken woman named Dr. Harris, had been looking to start a pilot therapy program. Not the usual therapy dog stuff, but a unique initiative. Former K-9 units working with veterans suffering from PTSD. This dog's not a mascot, she warned. Our vets need patience. Some of them haven't spoken in weeks. Jack said only one thing: let him try. The first visit was awkward. Ajax sat stiffly beside Jack as 2 veterans sat across from him, one staring at the floor, the other fidgeting with his sleeves. No one spoke for 10 minutes. Then the silent vet looked up, eyes lingering on Ajax's collar. He military. Jack nodded. The man stared for a moment longer before whispering, He looks like my old K9, Rico. Ajax turned his head and walked toward the man slowly, stopping just short of touching him. He sat, waited, silent, but present. The man reached out, tentative, and Ajax led him. Dr. Harris met Jack's eyes with a look that said, "This is working." After that, everything changed. Ajax became part of the weekly sessions. Sometimes he'd just sit at a veteran's feet, silent comfort. Other times, he'd respond to commands from those who hadn't spoken aloud in months. He didn't wag much, didn't lick hands like typical therapy dogs, but he was steady, strong, grounding. One man, a Marine named Carlos, said it best. When he looks at you, it's like he's saying, "I've been through it too." And somehow, that's enough. Word spread quickly. The VA started recording sessions. Donations trickled in to support the program. Miranda even visited once, beaming when she saw Ajax calmly working beside Jack. "You saved him," she said. Jack shook his head. "We saved each other." Later that evening, Jack and Ajax walked through the woods behind his house. The sky had started to burn orange with the sunset, and birds called across the canopy. Ajax trotted ahead briefly, then returned to Jack's side without a word. "Still got that soldier in you," Jack murmured. "But now you've got peace too." Ajax looked up at him, eyes calm, tail flicking once. For the first time in a long time, there was no mission to survive. No command to wait for. Only purpose, reclaimed. The first real snow came late that year. It blanketed the little town of Eldridge in quiet white, softening every sound and making even the busiest streets feel still. Jack stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching Ajax track paw prints across the backyard with practiced precision. Though his muzzle had started to gray and his movements were just a touch slower, there was still fire in his step. Time had passed, but not without purpose. The therapy program at the VA had grown. What began as one pilot session turned into weekly group meetings, then monthly workshops. Other handlers and their former K9s joined, creating a network of healing, one veteran at a time. Ajax became the program's symbol. His photo hung in the main hallway, mid-stride, eyes sharp and focused. To those who met him, Ajax was more than a dog. He was a bridge between silence and speech, between nightmares and peace. Veterans who hadn't touched another living soul in years found comfort in brushing his coat. Others who had forgotten how to trust felt safe in his presence. But even heroes grow old. It started subtly, slower mornings, stiffer joints, a sigh that lingered too long after lying down. Jack noticed, of course. He began adjusting their walks, shortened the training sessions, warmed Ajax's meals a little more each day. There were vet visits, supplements, quiet reassurances. Still, Ajax remained dignified, steady, loyal. One morning, Jack found him curled up by the back door, head resting on his paws, watching the horizon through the glass. He hadn't moved all night. Jack knelt beside him. "Morning, partner." Ajax's ears flicked, but he didn't rise. Jack didn't speak again. He just stayed there, hand resting gently on Ajax's back, letting the silence settle between them. He knew, so did Ajax. That afternoon, with the help of a trusted vet, Ajax was eased into sleep beneath the old oak tree in Jack's yard. The one where they had first trained together, the one where Ajax had finally wagged his tail without fear. Miranda came. So did Carlos, the Marine from the VA, and several other veterans who had felt Ajax's presence change their lives. They didn't speak much. They didn't have to. They laid Ajax to rest with his nameplate, a folded flag, and his old service collar, still worn but clean. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Jack stood beside the small wooden marker carved with a single word, AJX. Beneath it, loyalty, service, redemption. A few days later, the VA hosted a small ceremony in Ajax's honor. Jack was invited to speak. He stood at the podium, a little uncomfortable in a suit he hadn't worn in years, fingers wrapped around a small photo. Ajax on their first day outside the shelter, alert and focused. "I thought I was saving a broken dog," he said, but he was never broken. He was waiting for someone to see him for what he was, a soldier, a partner, a hero. He paused, his voice catching slightly. "We lose a lot in service. Friends, time, sometimes ourselves. But Ajax reminded me that healing doesn't always come in the form we expect. Sometimes it walks in on four legs and looks you straight in the eye until you remember who you are." When he stepped down, the room stood in silence, not out of grief, but out of reverence. In time, the program Ajax helped start was officially named after him, the Ajax Project. It continued to grow, reaching shelters, bases, and therapy centers nationwide. And though he was gone, Ajax lived on, in every life he touched, every veteran he comforted, and every handler who learned to listen to the silent stories behind their dog's eyes. Because Ajax wasn't just saved. He became a symbol of what can happen when someone refuses to give up on a soul the world almost forgot.